How's everyone doing tonight? Good?
Good.
Lots of smiles. All right.
All right, Jerry, we are streaming on YouTube.
Okay, excellent. I'll open meeting. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for participating tonight. Order, do you want to do the housekeeping message for our Zoom?
Yes, I will offer a simplified housekeeping. Just a reminder to mute yourself when you're not participating to avoid background noises. I may mute or unmute people as needed. As far as video goes, because it's a small group, you can just leave your video on. That's great. We are broadcasting and recording to YouTube. And we have people watching us there as well. We do not have any guests in the Zoom meeting at this point, and nobody registered, so I don't anticipate that. And I think that's it, and I'll turn it back to Jerry.
Okay, great. So it looks like I have 7:33 to call. We'll call the meeting to order officially. And I have a list that I'm going to use to do the roll call rather than going through the windows in the order that I have them. So, Christina Walker.
Here.
Nice. Joshua Fallleaf. Do not see Joshua. Marlo. I do not see Marlo. Denise?
Here.
Present. Mary? Hi, Mary. James?
Here.
Sarah? See Sarah yet. Jordan?
Here.
Hi, Jordan. Dina?
Here.
Hello. And Daniel.
Howdy.
All right, and myself, Jerry Johnson, I'm present. So the first order that we have is to approve the minutes from February the 10th. I hope everyone had a chance to read through those. I just had one comment that I wanted to throw out there. With my full appreciation as a person who, in all my years on this commission, has only taken notes one time, and it was brutally awful and probably the worst job ever done at taking notes. So I'm going to risk saying, and understanding that everyone has a different style and everything. I felt like all the topics were covered and everything. I just wanted to throw it out to the group. Sometimes we do brainstorming in this meeting, and this group has a lot of creative ideas and so on and so forth. And so we have it on video, so we can go back and look at it, and maybe that's good enough. I'll let you guys sort of decide. But I noticed that some of the brainstorming stuff wasn't in there, and I realized that's probably the hardest part to capture. So I just wanted to throw that out to folks for discussion. Otherwise, I had no issues with the minutes, and yeah.
And I, just so people understand, I explained to Jordan, as we've shifted to this new
online platform called iCompass, other board meetings are doing their minutes in iCompass, which is really not about narrative. It's really just tracking action. So that's how I coached Jordan, who did exactly what I explained to her. But I think with talking to Jerry too, I think that there is wisdom in finding a happy medium so that we have enough explanation of what was going on. And, the other challenge we've had is we've had people like Christina and others who have done such a fantastic job with such clear narrative that we've been spoiled. So I think we can find a happy medium here. And I can post our minutes differently than other boards, given that there is a lot of dialogue.
Okay, is no other discussion on that, then
Hang on, Jordan, did you want to chime in? What you're comfortable with?
Yeah, no, I just added that to my notes. I'll include more of the narrative sections for this meeting's minutes. Thank you for the notes, guys.
Thank you.
do we need to note that Marlo and Joshua have joined us for the roll call?
Duly noted.
All right. Can I have a motion? I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from February 10th.
I'll motion
Thank
to
you.
approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Thanks, Mary. All in favor can raise a hand. And I see all hands raised. Great.
Everyone raise their hands.
Everyone raised their hand. So the minutes are approved. We've already had a successful meeting. It's fantastic. Porter, any word on the Director of Equity and Inclusion being able to join us tonight?
So I did invite Farris, and he tentatively agreed, but I fear that he has been pulled in a different direction. Okay. He really wants to meet with you all and spend a little time, so I'm sure we can get him on a future agenda. And he sends his regrets for tonight, and he may magically appear at some point, and if so, we can introduce him at that point.
Great. We are excited to hear from him and welcome him at any time that we can have him join us.
Jerry, I just wanted to add that if we need to have, if for some reason our scheduled meetings conflict with his schedule, I'd certainly be willing to bend my schedule to just meet, for a short, unofficial meet and greet. Hello, how are you? Here's what we do, sort of a thing. And so I'd propose that as an option as well, if that helps us to connect with one another.
Yeah, I would be for sure flexible to accommodate that kind of meeting, just to get to spend some time with him.
I will convey that and see what his situation is. Thanks.
Okay. All right. The next thing up, we have a donated art proposal, which was familiar to me, and then I saw the date on the paperwork, and it was quite a while ago, but I think we've talked about it more recently than August of 2020.
I have to beg forgiveness from everybody, including
Robert and Lynette, on this, because it came, in the midst of a lot of craziness. And so I wasn't able to get to it. My understanding was that it wasn't a big priority for them. And then frankly, I just, then we had our retreat in January. So anyway, I'm really happy to get it to you all now. It's long overdue. And I think whatever, response we can give them is appreciated. So I think I may have mentioned it, but I don't think we've really delved into it.
So Porter, I'm going to give you my recollection of how this stuff works, and I encourage you to jump in and slap the back of my hand when I'm wrong. But I mean, essentially what we do is we make a recommendation to the city whether to accept this, correct?
Correct.
And it seems to me that we would make that recommendation once we sort of maybe had an idea of where it would go, or I guess there's a list of things we would want to know, right? Where would it go, and how's it? Indoor versus outdoor has got to be a huge thing. But then how it gets maintained, what it needs to be maintained, all of those sort of items seem to me to be important, and they may be. I don't think we have the same kind of contract for this as we do for like the murals and everything, but maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm remembering that incorrectly.
When you know, each artwork tends to be somewhat idiosyncratic depending on if it's sculpture, mural, that type of thing. You're exactly right. You know, it's your task as the professionals in this area to evaluate the circumstances and make the, you know, the best decision on behalf of the city. And frankly, the artist and, you know, the art owners, is this the best option? Maintenance is certainly a factor because nothing lasts forever, and you know, we don't have maintenance budget, and we have other artworks that we are responsible for. So that's an earnest consideration. I'm a big fan, obviously, of Walt and artists, so I have, you know, the greatest respect for these artists. I have some concern that, yeah, I'm not sure where a piece like this could go. Based on their submittal here, they do say it could be indoors or outdoors, although I have reservations about putting this in a public outdoor situation. If it were in an outdoor situation, maybe covered, like a back patio or something like that, that would be one thing. But uncovered in a public area makes me a little more cautious, both because of, you know, just wear and tear, but also potential vandalism.
Right. So you know, I'm gonna kind of dive into the where thing a little bit with this. I mean, is it on us to go to find a spot for? First of all, I think this thing is fantastic, and I think it's a very generous gift on their part. And as you say, the artist is, well, I mean, the piece. I think this piece speaks for itself in that regard. But I mean, is it up to this body, you know, to sort of shop a home for it? You know, I don't mean to be oversimplified or whatever, but how do we go about that?
I would say it would be, if we thought this was a great fit for somewhere in the city, then, you know, that would be our next step. And I think you're right. Before we accept anything, we would have to determine, you know, where is an appropriate site, and is it is it viable to put it there? You know, quite honestly, and I say this with the greatest respect to my employer, I'm not sure the city is the best place to be collecting donated artwork. You know, that's not what we do. So I think, that said, you know, there's a few people on this call that have some expertise in this area too. They might have some thoughts. So if we were able to find it a home, that would be okay. But no, I don't believe it's our responsibility to do that. I mean, you know, so it's a large piece. You know, so I'm thinking, well, where, you know, and I have recently spent some time out at the new medical facility, which I think is part owned by the city, and it has these vast open spaces where something like this could absolutely be shown. Lots of people would see it. It would have its own sort of breathing room there, and that kind of thing. That's just the first thing that popped into my head. So let's just say, for example, we thought that was a good idea. Would we then approach? I'm not sure how, you know, would we approach the city with that, or that facility? I don't know how that would. I would probably reach out to a contact at LMH and explain the situation and make the appropriate introduction, and explore that possibility. I mean, I'm willing to do that. So that's an interesting concept. Okay. I mean, I was just using it as an example because that's what I had thought of. I would like to be quiet for a few minutes and hear if anybody else has any thoughts or ideas about that.
I have just a couple, which is, if the artists say that it's available for outdoor space, then I trust that they'll that they know that the piece will withstand the elements. Secondly, you know, I think all public art stands to be victim to vandalism, and I don't think that should be a deterrent. And then at the same time, if people are giving art to the city I think it's wonderful if we are able to accept and find those places. And so I think like Jerry was saying, if there's a process by which we can, I guess, make available, like here's a piece that was donated to the city. Who would like to? Is there any place, any space, any organization who would like to present this, or even perhaps other spaces? I guess not public, but I hesitate to be resistant or hesitant to welcoming that donation of public art when we, as a city, like to value that and should value that. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I have an opinion. I'm not sure that it's up to the city to go to the hospital, let's say, or any other venue. I mean, I really think it's up to the donors to find out. That's just my opinion, whether there's a home at LMH West or not.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think maybe Denise, the way that I would look at that is that we would work with them. We wouldn't want to put it somewhere that they didn't think was the right spot for it. But we also wouldn't want to say, hey, we reject your donation form because it doesn't say that you've already agreed to a location for it. At least I don't think we would.
Right. I think that in the future, I'm not talking about this particular donation, but in the future, I think we may want to look at this policy of accepting artwork.
Okay.
I just want to add that that's an excellent point. I don't know if we should be able to, if we should have to do that and do that work and find that space. And so thank you, Denise, for those comments.
Yeah.
That was really, really good. And I think that can help determine whether or not the city can accept a piece or not. If a recipient has already been identified, maybe that's some of the criteria.
Is this second? Can you put the more back up, Porter?
Tell me where.
First page. It says available upon death or estate downsize. So it's almost like I'll probably use the wrong word here, but bequeath, bequeath, is that the right word? Sorry.
Bequeathed, yeah. Yeah.
So Walt contacted me about this before they submitted this and asked me how to do this. And that's when I sent them the information about the form and they filled it out. And they are, just doing advanced estate planning. Downsizing. That's also why I knew it wasn't urgent, because it's not urgent, happily. But this is what they're doing, and so yeah, they're being very respectful to the artist and the artwork and trying to make sure it has a good home. And you all remember that Walt was one of the 2 artists that made the awards for the Phoenix Award when we had it at Theater Lawrence, and they had a beautiful exhibition at Theater Lawrence as well.
I don't know the history of this policy, but it made it sound from reading the form that it was a policy that's in place, and maybe there are some requirements that are not seen here, but maybe modifying the procedure for this to include something where the donors be a little bit more specific, or maybe do a little bit more of the legwork, I want to say, to find an appropriate place that pleases the donor and the recipient in advance might be a good thing to add to this procedure or policy. And again, I forgive me if I don't know the background about it, but I was just thinking maybe having that clearer in the donation form might be helpful.
I think you're right, Dina. We did this for the mural policy a few years ago, and I think Denise is right. This one could probably use some further refinement so that folks do come with an idea of where it would go. You can't just back the truck up and put it on the front porch of City Hall, because invariably, if we chose a place without asking them or working with them, even if that wasn't there, then we would probably disappoint someone. So I agree with you and Denise and Joshua on that this form could probably use a little bit more attention, maybe really in the vein of the mural thing, because the mural policy, because it talks about sort of the dispensation of things and the care and what happens after a certain amount of time and all of that stuff. I mean, this kind of piece, you can look at it and say, well, if we put that in the lobby of LMH West, it could sit there for 100 years, as long as the building, and probably wouldn't suffer, it wouldn't fall apart on its own or whatever. But maybe not every piece would be like that. And so I agree. We can spend some time on that.
I had another.
Just as a reminder, I just want to
I'm sure
make
you're all aware that at lawrenceks.org/public art, this is where the donated art guidelines exist. So this would be the policy that you'd want to explore. And this is a administrative policy that was developed in 2001. So it's probably time to take a look at it. But it does have a fair amount of good information. And quite frankly, this is so sporadic and unique. I think this is only the second or third donation request I've seen in my almost 6 years here. So that's part of the challenge. Is the city, I don't think, is typically the first place that somebody looks. There may be misunderstanding sometimes that by giving it to the city, it's going to the broader city and not the city government, for clarity. So all those things play in, and I just don't know. I was going to get some direction from you all, and then I can reach out to these folks and share information, get more information, that type of thing. So just so everybody's up to speed, because I know we have several new folks here too.
Really, if it's a bequest, they're giving it to the entity that they would like it to be assigned to. And then as a response, our obligation is simply to say, yes, it can be accepted, or no, we don't want it. I mean, that's the way it generally is with any nonprofit. You don't have to take something that is offered to you.
Right. But also, I wouldn't want to take it without knowing where it was going to go. Or I wouldn't want to recommend, that's our job, right? As an advisory committee, I wouldn't want to recommend to the city that we accept this generous gift without at least some sort of understanding of where it would go. I think we should make ourselves available to work with them to find a place. It doesn't sound like it's urgent. And I think we have some ideas. And then I think, as a side note, what I'm hearing is that maybe we should review this, that order, whatever it was, 81 or whatever, and maybe borrow a little bit from the mural rule as far as like making sure it's tidy with respect to ongoing care and maintenance and so forth.
One thought that I have is that hospitals, LMH West, and others, I mean, LMH West already has art on the wall. So there probably is some kind of board, a review board that has looked at the possibility, you know, at works and approves pieces. So there's probably a review that would need to be done from the hospital's part.
Yeah.
That situation is unique in that the art center curates that exhibition. There's some rotating exhibitions in that space, and then there's some permanent collection as well. So, but I kind of lean on the side of like us not facilitating that and maybe just giving some ideas and say, hey, you know, here's some ideas, whether you would like to contact the art center. It seemed like in that application, they said theaters, museums, etc. So maybe, you know, they contact Theater Lawrence, see if they want it, the art center, Spencer, you know, like, but I don't necessarily think it's our job to, you know, make those. Yeah. Unless it was a city building that they were specific and they're like, you know, this would look amazing in City Hall, then I would feel comfortable to say, hey, that's our jurisdiction. But I feel like we can have some suggestions, say, hey, here's a great idea. You can contact, you know, the art center, they have an exhibition staff. You can contact Theater Lawrence because they have exhibition space. You can talk to the Spencer, you know, and so just give it, but, you know, not putting the legwork on Porter for that. I don't know. I just feel uncomfortable with us, you know, taking that on as a side gig. I don't know. It feels weird.
It also establishes a precedent.
That's true. And we know how problematic that can be.
Well, if that's really the direction we want to go, then we need to amend our form so that it says we want it to go here. Not we, our body, the people who are making the donation, right?
Yeah, I like Porter's, you know, language about, is it the city at large or is it city property? You know, so maybe having some language in there about that. And then if it's city property, it feels like it'd be under the Cultural Arts Commission. If it's just citywide, then it's up to that donor to connect with that venue that they might want to have that piece located.
And that may be as simple as adjusting the donation form.
Obviously, it's a good idea to look at the policy, but I don't know if we have to make a major policy change to adjust the donation application form and just, you know, clarify what exists. And again, we're not a collecting institution, so it's not like we have abundant places where we can show art in a safe and good way.
Yeah, I understand, I get it. I'm just a little bit nervous about people's perception of who they're giving it to. I mean, we ran into a lot of trouble with that with the murals. Because it does become city art when it's on the wall, no matter what wall it's on, and people are moved by it and have very, very strong attachments to those things.
Could this be something that the Public Art Committee takes a look at that policy to determine whether changes needed to be made or if it was as simple as modifying a form?
I think so. I think that's
it's a good idea. And, you know, just for clarity too, when we did accept a triptych painting from Van Gogh several years
ago now. That is in City Hall, and you know, part of that is a very clear agreement between both parties as to the circumstances. In that case, I think we determined that the city really wasn't appropriate to own that artwork. So it's on very long-term loan to the city. And if the city ever decides that it needs to move it because that space is going to be used for different purpose, then we go back to Van Gogh, and they have the right of refusal to say, we'll either take it back or you can dispose of it. So, those things, I think that's part of the challenge with art, is art can last a really long time, and it does become sometimes beloved. So being mindful of the long term and very clear on what is the agreement and understanding, in 10 years down the road or 20 or whatever. So all that is part of this process as well.
So just to try to focus a little bit on what our action is with respect to this, I don't think we're at a place where we can make a recommendation to the city whether or not to accept this, right? Does everyone agree?
Yeah.
So the one action that I heard was that the public art subcommittee will take a look at this. And then Porter, maybe pending their changes, we can go back to the donor and have them use the new form, which hopefully we can get. And maybe when we do that, we can communicate to them an idea or two that they could pursue for a place for it. I'm not saying do it ourselves, just.
Yeah, I think, in this case, again, the artist reached out to me, so I completely agree with Mary, and I really appreciate her protecting my time. In this case, also because it's taken a while, I think I will call them and just explain the circumstances and just offer some thoughts and, go from there. And then I can say, because I don't know that changing the form or anything is going to make the outcome different. So if that's agreeable, I'm happy to have a conversation with them and at least explain the circumstances and offer other thoughts. And, quite frankly, this is on a public agenda. So if anybody here had any thoughts and wanted to share this information with someone, that could be done as well.
I would just add that I agree with kind of what's been determined, and I think that dialogue is important, and if possible, amending the form in coordination with folks who have donated before. I think that would be helpful in terms of helping to define where that might be. There's a million different art pieces that I think the city would love to accept, but doesn't quite fit the aesthetic or mood of whatever space somebody is creating. And we'd love to have it, but we just don't have a place for it. So then where would it go? So I think, again, like to save Porter and others or another subcommittee, the work of having to go find a place for this, an amazing work of art. I think that's challenging. I think it's a little too much, but I think some coordination, some dialogue would be helpful, both for the city and for the artists, just to have that conversation.
I agree with Joshua.
Any other things, comments from anyone before we move on? All right. Next item on the agenda is the statement that I think Jordan and Sarah drafted after the January 6th events. We tabled that last time, mostly for time. Prior to last meeting, the city had issued a statement Jordan, I guess I'll appeal to you for, where you guys are at with that. Do we want to press on with it, or what are your thoughts?
I think it is still important that we, I think in previous meetings, we've mentioned that we might not need to address specifically the insurrection on January 6th, just because so much time will have passed by the time we finish, that it would look a bit like too little too late, or that we're not taking it seriously as we should. So I think the last time we spoke about this as a committee, we all agreed that the draft statement that Sarah and I wrote needs some editing, just so that we can make it a little bit more applicable to the everyday roles of the LCAC, and less targeted towards addressing specifically that insurrection. Because the whole point of the draft that Sarah and I wrote was that it's important to address white supremacy in our community and reassure artists and creatives and the community at large that has no place in Lawrence, Kansas, or won't be legitimized in creative circles and in the city. So in that regard, the draft statement that we sent Porter, it's got a lot of revision we could do to make it a little bit more applicable, but I do think it is still super important that we talk about it, and that we publish something.
So would you all, so noting that you guys, this was, produced right around those events and everything, would you all like the opportunity then to go ahead and make those edits and then bring those back to the group?
As long as Porter gives the okay, because I know there was concern about coma. So Porter, would that be all right, or should we move this to one of the subcommittees, or would it be all right if Sarah and I clean it up and bring it back?
One thought I have initially is this is a different approach than I think boards have taken in the past. So I guess one of the questions, I totally agree with you. I think it's important to talk about this. I think it's important to have this information. As a staff person and liaison, I'm just not sure where it goes, because this is an advisory board to the city commission. And so you're creating a statement on behalf of one board, and I'm just not sure what to do with that. So I would say that I would like to have a little more direction from the board and however you want to proceed. And I do think a committee working on this, whether that committee is just you two or a larger committee, makes sense to get clarity on what's the intent behind this and where does something like this need to go as a benefit to the city. Is this something that you want to take to the city commission for some sort of a review and approval? Or, so that's where I'm a little confused as a staff person, is not quite sure what to do with this.
I think the last time we brought it up, which now that I think about it was the January retreat, I think it was Joshua who, let me just get my thoughts in order. I think it was Joshua who said that this might be a great opportunity to kind of almost reaffirm our mission statement in a way. So that's kind of the direction I thought we were heading. But again, it has been 2 months since we last talked about this as a committee. But that would be, I think, the direction that we were going. Also, not to put you on the spot, Joshua, but I do remember in January that you said that there might be people interested in editing this with us. So would we need to form a subcommittee tonight to include anybody who's not Sarah or I who wants to help out with that, or what?
Well, I do recall supporting making a statement, and whether the city commission approves or adopts it or issues it on behalf of its, the city commission itself, that'd be great. But I think even acknowledging, I think the Lawrence Cultural Arts Commission's position on these matters is still relevant as well. Yeah, I would continue to be happy to help in any way, shape, or form to make sure we take a stand, to make sure we're not silent on it. I think, there's always the risk of being negative and we don't like this and this is unacceptable and this, but I think affirming, as Jordan said, affirming our values, our mission, our position on a lot of these matters, especially as it relates to art, and where we come from with this, you can denounce a lot of hatefulness by affirming the opposite, something positive, something inclusive. And I think this was what motivated me or interested me in talking to the inclusion and diversity director. I can't remember his title or whatever, but yeah, I really wanted to have that conversation with him, so that we were kind of unified in similar language, similar positivity, that affirms that this is a place that welcomes all. And by welcoming all, we diminish, denounce, and exclude those who try to overrun and who try to exclude and be aggressive and hateful and unaccepting. So I continue to be welcoming of that opportunity to help craft and write and have those conversations, just as Jordan rightly remembers.
That
Can I jump in with a question here? I was not at the strategic planning thing, and I certainly applaud the spirit of what you are all saying. But and I appreciate it, and I think probably at the time in January it was at the forefront of everyone's consciousness. As we look at it in March, is there a way that we can move it forward by attaching it to something that the city's already considering? I know, and Porter, you might have some better insights into this. The city is in the process of redoing its strategic planning. And I know that there is a section in that strategic plan that particularly addresses equity and inclusion and all of the things that you've been discussing. And possibly, Porter, there be a way that this group could formally endorse something related to what is coming forward in that plan? Because that way we'd be kind of hanging on to something that's already happening and moving that forward and staying within our role as an advisory committee. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. That's good wisdom. And this is
great to talk about. And Joshua actually got me thinking about something too. So for everybody, again, lawrenceks.org/strategic-plan is the strategic plan page. And as you'll remember from my presentation last month, Mary is absolutely right, and I give her extra credit and a big star because she's memorized part of the strategic plan, which is impressive. One of the commitments, there are 6 commitments and 5 outcomes. One of the commitments is equity and inclusion. And what that says is fair and impartial delivery of services so that no group is disadvantaged or burdened, along with having inclusive representation and participation for all. And then a statement, inclusion and racial equity drive the culture of our organization and our community. When we intentionally prioritize race, it can no longer be used to predict life outcomes, and outcomes are improved for all. We remove systemic barriers to reconcile historic injustices and their continued presence in our work. So this is embedded as part of our strategic plan, 1. 2, Joshua just got me thinking. Farris, as you probably all know, Farris hasn't been here all that long, and bless his heart, he started in the midst of the pandemic, so most of his work here has been done virtually. But he is also in the process of taking over as the staff liaison for the Human Resources Commission. And I would dare say that this, what I'm hearing thus far in intention, I understand being on the cultural side, but it's certainly on the human resources side too, or human relations, excuse me, I'm confusing my resource and relations. So, I think that's really interesting, is to possibly coordinate some sort of meeting between the two boards with, committees meeting between the two boards and talking further about, where might something like this go. So I think that, that's a great idea. I appreciate both of those perspectives. And Mary, I agree, one option may be just how would this tie into the strategic plan? And I'm sure that Dr. Muhammad would have some thoughts on that too.
Could it also be indicated on the cultural plan? I know in the strategic planning committee, we did discuss the opportunity of revisiting some language. And I do like a lot of the language in Jordan and Sarah's letter, which is a little bit more direct than some of the language in the strategic plan. And I'm also wondering, in the cultural art grants, I thought we've done a great job of having parts of the cultural plan represented in those grant guidelines. Could something, using some of the language from the letter be used in the cultural plan and hence the grant guidelines? So it's a little bit more of a direct connect.
That's the work of a committee to determine. I think that's certainly an option as well. I hope
understands. I'm not, as far as what this says and the intention behind it, I'm all for it. My struggle is knowing where does this belong in the broader structure of the city and the Art Commission and all the other boards and commissions. That's what I'm trying to understand. And it sounds like maybe some conversations might help guide that too.
And I do like that idea of, how Joshua said, instead of just kind of saying reactive, like we don't like this, we're having an action point. So we're saying here, we invite grant or projects to apply for our community art grants that will respond to these issues. So something, where it's less than just a statement that would just live on the website, it would be more of something that could be integrated into programs.
I will add that the mission as developed.
The new strategic plan is we create a community where all enjoy life and feel at home.
I think also, we touch on that in our, in this body's mission statement. There's some language along those lines. It may not be as strong as what's now in the strategic plan, what Sarah and Jordan's letter had, and maybe we want to look at that and make sure we're in alignment. That language is in alignment with those things as well.
The other area that we can look at within that is that I think within each of those areas of the strategic plan, they're currently working on the key performance indicators.
Oh.
And that might be an area that could be added.
Basically, how do you measure if you're moving in the direction that you want to on some strategy
and or action?
So what I hear, in summary is that we make sure we're aligning with those aspects of cultural plan, strategic plan. We should probably throw in the city's letter as well, right? The city made a statement after the 6th. And again, I think we say this every meeting, but make sure that our mission, and our efforts are aligned with those things.
Well, I would just add that, you know, I think we're all in agreement in the denunciation of those actions that took place. And to make a statement is great, but to follow through with action, I mean, you need to make that statement, but you need to follow up on that. And I think the city's hiring I looked it up while I was listening, the director of equity and inclusion, it is a commitment. I mean, I think that is representative of the city's commitment to doing that. And I think we should be very, very, very strong on that front. I mean, I think that's who we are. That's what we believe. And even from an artistic perspective, from a cultural arts perspective, we need to push that point home, even if, you know, we can't just make a statement. And so I appreciate Mary's contribution about attaching it to maybe more current things, even though just, I think recently, I think it was QAnon who was saying that this was the date in March that Trump was going to take over again. And so they increased the security around the Capitol. So it hasn't gone away, and it's not going away. But I do think moving forward, action steps do need to be taken within a strategic plan.
So Porter, can we ask you to reach out to Dr. Muhammad about, I guess, in your discussion about when we can get together, but also bring up the topic of the human relations group and us. I don't know, I like the idea of having a joint meeting. That sounds like fun. To talk about maybe the best way to express those ideas.
Yeah, I think before you have a joint meeting, it probably makes sense if there was a committee from both groups to explore and determine, you know, capacity and interest is a first step. Would be a good idea.
I bet I could predict a couple of volunteers. But I'll call for volunteers for that group.
I'll volunteer for something like that, and throw out an idea. Oh, this is James Alexander speaking. But I just at some point I was liking to gauge all of your thoughts on something like this. I understand we're all a advisory committee, and we're not necessarily the people doing the concrete actions sometimes, but I was going to, and I think I might have brought this up before the pandemic hit, but so I'm from Michigan, and there's this festival called Top of the Park in Ann Arbor. It's a month-long celebration of multidisciplinary fields. So, you know, theater and movies and music of all sorts, and it goes on for about a month, and there's free admission, and there's food vendors, that type of thing. So it just, you know, when I moved here, it seemed like Lawrence was similar to Ann Arbor in some senses, and something like that might take off in the future. You know, I understand there's a whole pandemic and all that, but just to gauge, it seems like something like that could match a lot of these models that we talk about in the strategic committee of, you know, balancing the local and supportive environment where people could advocate for their ideas, like the Paper Planes Literary Festival and Free State. It could be like a additional venue for them to advocate for themselves. So it meets all these actions of, you know, strengthening the network, embracing all, and minding the gaps. There seems to be a lot of infrastructure that could be used for something. So anyway, just an idea for something tactile that we could push these ideals forward with.
Thank you.
Well, and
Joshua, James,
sorry.
Who else?
Obviously. And just to kind of extend James's point and remind us of Marlo's point earlier about maybe this would be a great opportunity to, what did she say? kind of bring in the language of this statement of affirmation and support back into our art grants applications, and remind people that you can apply for an art grant and focus your work towards these issues, because I really liked Marlo's point about that. So this committee that we're forming, would it also work to figure out how we can turn this kind of statement into that action internally, and like maybe that means we align the language of the statement with our existing applications and our existing policies. Would that be something that we look at?
Well, I think this group, which would liaise with the human relations group, would bring ideas back. That subgroup would bring, this is just how it is in my head. We don't have to go with that, but would bring those ideas back. What you all worked on together, and then we can. Because we have the grants committee and we have those groups set up, and then you could share those, and then those would be incorporated into the grant language and the scoring. That's how it's all really in there. It's in the application process, and then we say you have to hit on these points, right? And then we grade them in giving the awards. We grade in granting. Awarding those grants, we grade them according to those points. So in my mind, you all would work with the HR group to bring those ideas back to us, and then that committee and this body as a whole would incorporate those into our grant application and scoring.
Can I ask a question? What is our timeline for the grants going up? Because that's my concern, is like
Great
delaying
question.
them. And I just get nervous with the TGT funding and just us not being able to move forward because we don't know if that pool of money, what it's going to look like in the future. So could we, would this be something that would slow that process down, or is it something we could move action on quicker for that grant guideline to just get that program running, and then develop this partnership between the two boards and get some bigger visions going?
That's a great point, Marlo. The timing of it, we may have to leapfrog or whatever, but that's the item after next on the agenda is our budget. And the last since the retreat, what we've talked about is that we're just going to proceed but we definitely want after the next agenda item to find out if there's any more information on how that's going to go, because we have all of these things pending in spring. This is the time where we start to do all that stuff. So
I think to Marlo's point, and she may be aware of the Art Center Board's conversations, and I feel then, as I do now, that no new ideas should prevent what's happening from happening. I don't think we need to rush any decision making that may impact the community art grants. Those should go forward as they ought to. But I think this is a larger partnership for a more long-term sustainable effort, that if things don't happen fast enough, then that's fine. Then they get implemented, at a later date. And so I would be supportive of not putting a timeline on any of these actions, because it should be well thought out, well discussed. And if community art grants come up, then they go forward as they are already determined to do.
Yeah, for this go around, I would agree. So there's an item between the budget conversation and this, which is the storefront art committee meeting, which I'm real interested to hear in. But before we move to that, are there any other points that anyone would like to make on the item that we've been talking about.
You mentioned a couple of times the Human Resources Commission and our kind of having a conversation. I would ask really that Dr. Muhammad be there and be present and help to kind of guide and help us to think through what this looks like, what his plans are, what his directives are, what his goals are, to help make sure that we're not excluding him from the conversation, of which he ought to be an integral part. As Porter said, he might have a significant role in that, which I think is a good thing. But I just wanted to add that he ought to be a significant part of that conversation.
Yep, I would agree.
Jerry?
I'm wondering, it's not on the agenda per se, but I'm wondering, since we brought up about the community arts grants, is if I can just get some guidance from you all based on what I'm hearing. And let me share my screen and show you what I'm talking about. So just quick reminder, and for those who weren't directly involved, last year we went through the community art grant process. We reviewed the applications, they were scored, and then the March meeting that we were going to review all that, one, there wasn't a quorum, and two, there was a little thing called a pandemic just getting started. And so at that point, it fell off the agenda and was not implemented, which actually was a good thing in the sense that the TGT fund also dried up very quickly because of the pandemic. So all that said, we're actually running late. I still have a dilemma as a staff person trying to figure out how we can do all these things with a still less than 0.5% TGT fund. But that said, you know, these are the, so just a reminder, everybody, this is at lawrenceks.org/art-grants. These are the community arts grants. These are the 2020 community art grant guidelines. And you guys can look them up. And as has been pointed out, they're tied back to the citywide cultural plan, which includes balance the local, embrace all, celebrate community, build places together, build and market a creative brand, and 5, promote lifelong learning. All of that is in this. And so, you know, this exists now. We could use this, and I know that people are hungry for grant opportunities, and while I cannot promise that funding will be available or 100%, you know, it does make sense to go ahead and initiate the grant program and the selection process. I don't have it in front of me, but we have last year's applicants. I guess that gets tricky. I don't know if those people would desire to do the same thing. They could submit the same application again, so we could go through it that way. But yeah, I've not initiated this. I was kind of waiting for a little bit of direction from the Cultural Arts Commission. And so, you know, if this is agreeable, or if you want to come up with some way to review this and then give me a thumbs up and say this is a good way to go ahead and move forward with this.
Yeah, so Porter, help us understand this. We all know what we don't want, right? We don't want to award, you know, these, grade them, you know, score them and say, we're going to do this and this and this and this. And then, you know, send emails to people saying, oops, sorry, it's not actually going to happen. I mean, not that it's the end of the world, but we want to avoid that to the degree that we can. So where is that cut line? Where is that? I want to get these out. I think we should get them out. I think we should accept ones that people did last year almost verbatim, so that they don't have to, they did the work already and everything. And if it's still applicable, I think we should allow them to do that. But, you know, I think we should also tell them, or I don't know. I want to avoid what I said. And so the cut line that I'm looking for is, you know, when do we know? Yes, they'll be funded. No, they won't. Or they'll be funded. Your budget will be 50% instead of, you know.
I wish I had a direct answer for you.
I'll remind everybody the TGT fund is based on transient guest tax revenues, which means hotel stays. Unlike other funds that are budgeted through the general fund or things, there's money available upon budget. In this case, it is contingent on revenues coming in. And as I said, that's been down more than 50%. And the problem is we don't get reports on that until the next quarter. So we're always looking back to see where we are. So Jerry, I apologize. And believe me, as the staff person overseeing this, it's really frustrating to me to not be able to be more definitive with people. I'm in the process of administering the TGT grants. And I've explained to the TGT grant awardees the same thing, that what I'm doing at this point is sending out the agreements and award letters for those chronologically. We cannot afford to pay everybody their grant right up front. Happily, several events happening in the spring and summer and then more in the fall. So my hope is by spreading them out chronologically, everybody will be able to get their full funding. But again, I can't promise that. And, people are in need of the funds to do the marketing for their events. So with the community arts grants, we're in a similar, conundrum. I agree with you. I want to be upfront with people and make sure that's clear at the get-go that, we simply cannot guarantee that they would receive these funds, but we want to move forward. And if we have to allocate a percentage, that may be one way to move forward. And I have to work with the finance director and figure that out.
Yeah. I mean, I find it hard to imagine that ours is big enough that we would be doling it out over time, but I don't know. Maybe that's not true.
Theoretically, how much money should we have to grant?
The budgeted amount is $25,000.
That is a tiny amount of money. It would seem to me that the city could find it somewhere in their loose change.
I think the trouble is that we are tied to this TGT funds, so we're not in this general fund where we probably should be.
I think our most important job is to lobby to be taken out of the TGT funding and get a separate budget line.
I agree full-heartedly. I sent a letter to the commissioners, and I did get some positive feedback from several of them on that same issue, citing that economic strategic plan being so focused on arts and culture. And so I just feel like it's absurd to be, really worried about $25,000 when we're the city of the arts in Kansas. So I feel like we have to change it, and we have to be able to get these programs going, because just looking at that grant guideline from 2020, we're a whole year behind. So I think like our applications were due March 8th. We're sitting here March 10th. And I feel like as soon as we could get those ships off and running, people can start thinking of ideas to do, as vaccines are rolling out and people are wanting some recovery efforts. I feel like if there's a transparent way, I thought the communication was great with the TGT grants. As a grant recipient, like it was very clear. Like I thought all the emails were explained very clearly. This is what you expect. This is, the timeline. If we can do something similar to that, I would be in favor of it, just for expediency and just getting money out the door.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, Marlo. You said it very well.
So how do we do it, Porter? Let's proceed, and we'll do it in the style of which you've done it with the TGT grants, as far as telling people what the outcome might be. I mean,
Yeah, agreed. I have to tweak the guidelines a little bit just to adapt to a different timeline. And so I need to look at this and figure out how to address that. Sorry, other thoughts are running through my head as I talk this through. But let me go ahead. Basically, what I'm hearing is you all want to move forward with the community arts grants as quickly as possible. You want me to provide good communication to the applicants so they understand the circumstances and understand that they may or may not receive funding based on current circumstances. And I will work with the existing community arts grants guidelines with your permission to make adjustments according to the different schedule for this year and limited requirements and that type of thing. My hope would be is if I can do all that, I could make a new deadline in April, and then you all could review and award in May, which still gives, you know, the better half of the year. And I would encourage applicants then to adjust and adapt accordingly to fit within the shorter time frame. So if that works for everybody, that's what I will plan to do.
Okay. Do we need to vote on that? We don't need to vote on that, right?
I have one more question. And then in line with that, would you carry over any grants that wanted to be carried over from last year into this cycle?
Yeah, that's a good idea. I can go back and invite those people and say, rather than resubmitting, we can just accept your grant from last year. That's a great idea, Mary. Thank you. That actually makes my life easier too.
It makes my life easier too. And maybe Marlo's as well.
Yes.
Good point. I hadn't considered that. Okay.
And not only would it be verbatim, it would be in fact what we already have from those.
Well, that's a good point, is should we just go with that? Because those grants were never realized. None of those were ever realized. You guys reviewed them, but, you know, that's interesting. If I went with what was reviewed last year and brought that to the April meeting, you could actually make a determination then based on the grants that were submitted last year. The question is, do all those people still want to submit applications effectively?
Well, there's more than one question there, right? Because the world has been turned inside out.
There are people who probably have ideas or needs that they did not have at grant proposal time last year. And I love the idea of allowing the ones that were submitted last year to stand as they are and not create extra work for people. But I would like to see what's out there. I'd like to see what people need or want or thinking, particularly with I'm not going to list all the events. We all know them that have happened since the last grant cycle happened. So I think we would be missing some stuff.
Yeah, and I want to be clear with everybody that the eligibility for this is not individual artists.
Eligible for LCAC grants are organizations with a Lawrence, Kansas address proposing projects cited in Lawrence that are designed to meet the purpose of the LCAC grant program and benefit Lawrence residents. So I just want to be clear on that I know there's been discussion, and I love that idea, but it's very difficult for a municipality to provide individual grants to individuals. Because there is legal oversight that we are required to do for the IRS and everybody else. So I just want to make sure that's clear. That said, if Theater Lawrence were to get a grant, or the Art Center, or any other number of other arts organizations, theoretically then they're using those funds to help benefit local artists.
I don't mean to complicate it, but since Jerry brought it up, I think some of those grant applications from last year might be amended given the circumstances. And so while not taken as was submitted last year, there might be some twists or some turns or some adjustments that might need to be made, that those applications might take into account, and not mind the extra work that others would be happy to avoid.
So with that, I think what I'll do is extend an invitation to those that submitted last year, explain all this. They can either let it stand, or if they want to make modifications given the circumstances, they can. Of course, the big unknown is health-wise going forward, although the further out we go, the more likely we are to be able to do more.
So I think I can take all of this in, and if you all are comfortable giving me that direction, then I can move in that direction. And I'll, either we'll come back in April and be ready to go, or we'll come back and be prepared for the next step.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Thank you, Porter.
Thank you.
Okay. Storefront Art Committee. Who wants to take that?
I attended that meeting and it was really fantastic. This was a springboard off of the idea that Michael Davidson from Explore Lawrence had brought to the table about using empty storefronts, which we have more of since the pandemic, and creating spaces for art in them and what the city's relationship might be. The meeting was wonderful. We had city representatives between Porter and myself, and Dina's on that committee, and Kim from Explore Lawrence, Michael Davidson, Margaret from the Art Center, and the Chamber, which I thought was great, and Downtown Lawrence. And so everyone is super enthused and had some great ideas for how to get that project going. There's a grant opportunity, which I think we discussed in this meeting last month, called Reimagine Spaces with the Kansas Creative Arts Industries Commission. And the grant application is coming up in mid-April. So the idea was that could the city be the grant applicant? And this would be the Cultural Arts Commission. And Michael Davidson from Explore Lawrence had said that Explore Lawrence could put in the matching grant funds, where we would have to put in, it's a $10,000 grant. We have to have $2,500 cash match. And so that would come from Explore Lawrence. So I thought it was really energizing, and so many wonderful ideas between performing arts that could be inside storefronts, to visual arts, to studio spaces, and some really fun things to come out of it. One thing we did talk about was the idea of having part of that grant funding be a coordinator for the program. So it doesn't just be loosey-goosey and up to, artists to connect with real estate storefronts, but having somebody with an art background that could know the needs of the artists and what would be required to exhibit in those spaces, and then also coordinating with those, either the businesses or the real estate agents. Sally Zagre from Downtown Lawrence was really enthused too, and she thought between her and the Chamber, they could be the liaisons between the real estate places downtown. And so I think our role would be more of from the art standpoint and providing guidance for the program, and possibly like accepting applications for artists to submit to those spaces, and having the coordinator curate and manage that program. Did I sum that up, Porter? Was there anything that I missed in looking at these notes?
I think you summed it up beautifully. And one thing I'm not sure
it was clear, but probably not limiting this just to storefronts. There was a lot of discussion about art in the downtown area, which obviously the Outdoor Downtown Sculpture Exhibition already does that. So I was thinking of potentially aligning this with that. And we've been trying to expand the Outdoor Downtown Sculpture Exhibition to include more than sculpture, as related to how public art is an evolving field of inquiry. And so, artists exploring other interactions, whether it be a musician playing down there or, painted windows or, all those types of things. So looking at all those possibilities. And Marlo, you're probably more familiar than me. I did go in and look at the grant, and it looks like this is all in alignment with what the grant is suggesting, is the idea of reimagined spaces, and it's not too limiting in that sense. So it's pretty open-ended in that sense. So I think that provides a good opportunity. And frankly, if agreeable to, in some way, shape, or form, tie either a part of this to the part of the ODSE, or basically, open them up together, is interesting to me. So, but I defer to you all to decide if that's a good way to go.
So is there a geographic area that this will be limited to?
I don't think we determined that. And Mary, I think you spoke eloquently about not, the cultural plan talks about art citywide. And so my thinking is, how do we make sure that is made available to everybody? And I think that's something we'd want to do as well. So, I have to figure that out. I don't have a direct answer, but I think we don't necessarily want to limit it, although there's logic to the concentration of energy downtown too. How diplomatic was that?
That's very diplomatic. And I have to bring that up every time. So
and I appreciate it. I really do. No, I'm with you 100% in the sense that, we do talk about a citywide cultural plan. So making sure that we're not limiting things. You're absolutely right.
That is kind of an intriguing idea. There are a couple empty storefronts in that area by Free State and Theater Lawrence that could be super fun and creative outlets for some kind of.
Well, and I would dare say, Theater Lawrence has literally reimagined its entire parking lot. And so that is a reimagined space and certainly open to art interventions in a good way.
Oh, and I would support, Mary's comment. As someone who often has kids, nieces, nephews, all sorts of folks, we explore all parts of Lawrence, trying to, get away from that close proximity so that we can have a good time. And so I think all of Lawrence really ought to thrive from the opportunity to experience, outdoor or storefront art.
I think it marries up well with the ODSE. How would we, I know we were talking about with ODSE taking some portion of those and sort of having a theme for some portion of those. Are you suggesting, Porter, Marlo, that we make that theme for that some portion of that this window front idea?
I don't think there's any discussion
what the mechanism is.
Like for submissions or how people would apply for it.
Yeah.
Or you're talking about like a theme. Yeah, no one discussed a particular theme or, because I know with the ODSE, we talked about John Brown. And I think there was an environmental theme. We've talked about that before, but we didn't identify any specific themes in that committee.
Yeah, so I guess what I was getting at was, and maybe my imagination was failing me there, but let's say we have some portion of these, whether they're sculptures or whatever, but these works, and rather than them going at 9th and Mass on this corner or they're actually part of this window front thing or whatever.
I'm looking at the
Marlo, you may know this. So the submittal deadline is April 19, 2021.
Yes.
Do you have any sense of how quickly they will be able to make their awards?
I don't off the top of my head, but I know someone I can ask.
Thank you. Because that'll be, Jerry, you're right. I hadn't gotten this far in my thinking, but that will certainly be a factor as to whether or no whether we know if we have this grant or not. And based on this, I would anticipate we probably wouldn't know till mid-May, because I'm guessing they have to pull a panel together and review these much like we would. So,
if I can, the request for submission just came out today, and they're asking for projects that will take place between July 5th, 2021 through June 30th, 2022.
And the deadline is April 19th.
So logistically, this gets a little tricky in that our budget is
within the calendar year. Although awards can go out, as long as they go out before December 31st, that's okay. But then these funds could then go out later if necessary. So that makes me feel a little more comfortable that this is doable on the financial side, and projects then could happen between July 5th and June 30th, 2022. And, honestly, our outdoor downtown sculpture exhibition, typically we put that up in May or June, and it stays up for the entire year, but the artists are paid upon delivery. So the funding is handled within the calendar year, but their artwork stays longer. So I think we can make that work.
Great.
The only thing I do have to check is if this is agreeable with you all, I do have to double check and make sure that, I don't know for $10,000 if I have to get city commission approval if we decide to apply for this grant. So I'll have to check on that, but that shouldn't be too hard if need be.
So I have one thing that I'd like to add really quickly, and this kind of ties back to what we talked about earlier as far as the statement regarding the events of January 6th. This is also kind of a little bit of a spoiler for what we might talk about with the outdoor sculpture exhibition later. Just that looking over some of the language, it doesn't look like there's any diversity, equity, and inclusion language included in the basic approach. And so I think that we'll talk about this with the outdoor sculpture exhibition a little bit, but it would be nice to just have that be a given baked into anything we do like this. So.
Thanks, Dan. Let's see, we're getting towards 9. Can we go to the budget? Anything else on that before we move to the budget? That's always a fun part of our discussion.
Well, the problem is it's always theoretical.
I was just going to say that it's great to see and hear from new members. So thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Dina.
So Porter can you put up the budget?
Yeah, bear with me a second.
Dusted off from 2019, the request. So this was our budget that we put in 2019 for 2020, which never got. It didn't happen. And then in 2020, we did not put in a budget for 2021. So I'm assuming, I hope this is correct, Porter, that our budget is what it was in 2019.
Right. So for clarity, this was the budget that was submitted for 2020. The budget that was approved, this was not raised to $45,000. It stayed at $25,000. The Phoenix Award stays at $3,000, and there weren't any additional public art projects. So I think the end was $49,000. And yes, Jerry, that was what was carried over this year. So you have the same budget that was allocated last year, even though last year we didn't use much, if at all, any of that budget. So the project is shut down because of the pandemic.
Right. So it's time for us to submit for 2022. And the question is, we go in with what we requested for 2020, which has a $20,000 increase for community arts grants and a $2,000 increase for Phoenix Awards, which brings the total, and everything else I think stays the same, and that brings the total to 76. I know what I think I know what you're looking for. So there's some discussion. It's just right down below there.
Sorry, hang on. So this was the other group that met, just so people understand what you're looking at. This was the strategic committee notes, and I knew that in here there was some discussion, and I think Marlo referenced this, of asking the city commission and the city manager to look at other funding options for the future, which I know that that's being considered. Marlo's message is good.
I've carried that message as well, because, people understand the frustration there. So that is certainly being taken into consideration, I think, in a good way, not just, okay, we'll look at it, but more like, yeah, let's really look at this and figure out what we can do. So that's good news.
So Porter, what I was wanting to do though is I was wanting to look at on the other page where you have the budget request is there are two paragraphs that describe the increases that we were looking for. Yeah, right.
There you go.
Yeah.
Because I think we want to spend a little bit more time on the other topic than just to mix it in. What I would like for us to do is, if possible, is to agree on what we put in for 2022. And if we can't do that tonight, I guess that's okay, but I think it's time. And the reason, if you actually go up two more paragraphs where it says community arts grants, it gives the history, and thank you for putting this together, Porter. It gives the history of the amount of applications that we got. So in 2016, we got 77,850 requested, right? Then there's this for 2017, 2018, 72,000, 2019, 55,000. So this is the reason why we thought at that time, back in 2019, when we made a request for 2020, that we should raise it from 25,000 to 45,000. That would give us the ability to fund more of the applicants. And we felt like, obviously we didn't think we could ask for enough to fund all of them. But so that's where the 45,000 came from. And then on the Phoenix Awards, we've been trying to increase it through all sorts of mechanisms, right? We went to the every other year thing. And then we just thought a small increase from 3,000 to 5,000 would help us give a better, financial contribution to the artists who make the awards, and also allow us to celebrate those individuals, the recipients, and get the word out about the awards themselves with a little bit more funding. So anyway, that's what gets us to the 76,000, and the easy way to go in, I would say, is for this group to say, yeah, well, we should go for that. We should put that in again. But obviously we need to, to talk about that. But I just wanted to sort of give everybody the historical perspective of what it is now, and Porter did that nicely. And then this is what we had requested that never got, it never got changed because of all of the circumstances. So thoughts on that?
I move we submit the grant or the request for 76,000.
What is the timeline? Like, when did we submit that 2020 requested budget? Is it now? Is this
Yes.
the time to do
Yes.
it? Okay.
Yes.
And I would be inclined to agree with Mary that, for simplicity and expediency's sake, I would be really thrilled with this budget.
So is that a second?
Like a second.
All in favor?
Let the record show that everybody raised their hands affirmatively. Thank you.
Imagine that the budget was the quickest agenda item for this group. Congratulations.
Okay, I did that quickly because I've got a question. Okay, if we've got that request in, is there something that we can do as an advisory commission, committee, whatever we call ourselves, to encourage the budget for this group to come out of funding other than the TGT? I know some of us have other lines of communication going as well, but is there something that we should also be thinking about doing as a group?
Well, you know, we've been talking about it since it
happened. That it wasn't necessarily a good idea, and we learned the hard way why it's not a good idea. And so I know Marlo wrote a letter to the commission. I did some thinking, and I shared with Porter that, I mean, I sort of get it, right? I see, you know, we don't tie ambulances to the guest tax, right? But what I was wondering is, maybe we shouldn't tie maybe they shouldn't tie our whole budget, or really any group's entire budget, to something like that, you know, so that we had, I mean, literally, we were unable to do our work. We had some wonderful meetings with lots of brainstorming about all kinds of great things and everything, but we didn't get to do our at least that part of our jobs. And that's a shame. And it also sort of goes against the direction of the community, and it goes against what we all know, you know, how the arts contribute to the community and make our community what it is. And so one of the things I was thinking is, I mean, yeah, we can ask them as a body, we could do it. Although Porter has told us there to, you know, make considerations, you know, when we do that, but we can go and say the whole thing should be out of there. But maybe, you know, and I'm always a mediator. I'm always trying to find, you know, middle ground or whatever, but, you know, maybe there's some portion of it that could be taken out of there that we could count on, you know, rather than just have zero. I don't know.
Well, it strikes me that with the new strategic plan by the city and the economic, what's it called, Porter, the economic development
strategic plan.
Yeah, with both of those coming in so heavily on the value of arts and culture to our community. And they're not talking about visitors to our community. They're talking about the quality of life for the people who live here. So if that's the case, if our community values arts and culture as an inherent part of our community, it would seem to me that we would want to fund that through tax dollars and not just be dependent on people coming in from out of town when we're talking about the benefits that our own community people get out of it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an auspicious, it gives us a leg up if we want to play with it.
Yeah. The holiday lights
are not about right.
Holiday lights are not funded out of the TGT, right?
I don't know.
Actually, they are.
I knew I'd get a big grin from him.
They are funded out of the TGT.
Oh, okay. So.
I have Marlo's email if that's helpful, if Marlo's comfortable.
Sharing that, I think she shared it So, because it speaks to what Mary's talking about too.
That's really good, Marlo.
Yeah.
I figure if I quote them, then, you know, it has to have some validity to it. And that's word for word just from that strategic plan. And it's like, I think you just hit the nail on the head. It's not just visitors that were our mission. Like, our mission is enhancing all aspects of the city, you know, from businesses to all different economic sectors. Like, the arts are integral to that. And I think, you know, it's being valued and recognized by outside agencies. And we have some strong arts advocates that we're lucky to have on the commission at the moment. So I think if we can capitalize off that, and this is our time, I think, to make some changes and some more innovative ideas for funding and programs.
So how can we piggyback on what Marlo has done here? I know I'm involved in some meetings next week, but it would seem to me that we ought to be doing something as a group, unless that's against the rules, Porter.
Once I get past the interesting uses of the ampersand, because
My social media manager side.
because that's what I do, is weird out on stuff like that. You know, one of the things that occurs to me is that, you know, funding for parks and rec activities has little to nothing to do with visitors coming from elsewhere. And the things that happen on Final Fridays are so unique and remarkable. And those are local people who just go out and connect. And I think by separating that funding from the TGT, as if it is somehow dependent upon bringing in money from outside sources, is extraordinarily problematic, because it doesn't fund the community spirit, the art, the artists who bring us together to enjoy that art. And I think it's not just a symbolic thing. It's a really significant factor in what makes Lawrence. So I appreciate Marlo's effort in that, and her language, ampersands notwithstanding. But no, she articulates it really, really well. And I think quoting folks back to themselves is, you know, one of the most powerful ways of communicating to them what they might have otherwise not realized they were saying. Yeah.
So ampersand, what I wonder is, because it's interesting. I've been in conversations with this group, this body before, where we've said, you know, those things, they go too much to sports activities, you know, and things like that. And those sports activities, those are the things that bring people into the hotels and all that kind of stuff. The, you know, the events I'm talking about or whatever. So, you know, and we've said, well, you know, certain part of that should go to the arts or whatever. So my comment is to the group: do we want to ask that our budget be 100% out of the TGT, or, you know what I'm saying? I wonder if we would be not leveraging some of the ability to leverage some of those funds. I don't know.
Well, that TGT fund would still be there, right? That transient guest tax grant, and that funds a lot of arts events and activities. So that could be that representative, but then our community arts grants that are celebrating the life and culture for our residents could be out of the general fund. That to me philosophically makes sense. Okay. So like, these events serve that mission. These programs serve this mission. So I don't know. That's where I sort of stand on it.
Okay. I agree, Marlo. And right now I think Parks and Rec is looking at some of this. So we want to look a little harder. So Porter, is a lobbying effort appropriate to come from this type of body, or does it have to come from us as individuals, or can it be both?
I think Marlo did a good job of explaining the, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hats that she wears in the arts and culture realm. And so, and Michael Davidson has come and spoken on behalf of Explore Lawrence. Now, he is the executive director. But I think that, one, you could endorse what Marlo has sent and put the Art Commission stamp on that, so to speak. Two, I would offer that, you can, now that we're doing meetings virtually, it's really not too hard to come to the first part of a city commission meeting and offer public comment. And, if you did that over the course of several meetings and, 1 or 2 of you appear at each meeting, reminding them that this is really important, that's a valid way of just keeping it in front of them and lobbying in that sense. And I would say it's better when you say, I'm Mary Doveton, I'm both, an artist in this community and obviously the director of Theater Lawrence and a member of the Art Commission, and we believe this is important.
So let's pick at that idea of us as our citizenry. I mean, we can I don't know. I mean, we can make comments at city commission meetings, right?
Right, but that gets annoying.
Don't give me an open mic at the city commission meeting as well.
You only have 3 minutes.
Well, I can say a lot in 3 minutes.
Well, people do say a lot in 3 minutes.
Well, I do think it's important to note that, I don't know, I got a letter from the mayor that I was selected as a part of the city commission. And I think as an advisory board to the city commission, we collectively can make a very strong statement to the city commission about what our budget might ought to look like, just as any other part of the city would do the same based on their needs and their interests and their things. And so I would certainly defer to the group, and support whatever statement we might make collectively as to how our budget might look.
I don't have any issue with endorsing Marlo's letter. It was well stated, and I thought it was outstanding. I just wonder, I don't know. I mean, we're supposed to submit a budget, right, to do our work that's in our mission, and are we supposed to say where our money? I guess we can ask or request, or that our money come from a certain place or whatever. It just seems I don't know why I don't know why it feels odd to me. But it seems like if we're going to do that, if we're going to endorse her letter and submit it, or put our stamp on it, we ought to do it with the budget. Although
I agree, and I follow somewhere in the middle between requesting and demanding. Somewhere in there, there's a sweet spot.
Yeah, I don't think we're
I think we're an advisory committee. We're an advisory board. We advise, based on the sustainability of what it is we do and what it is they appointed us to do, and a more reliable budget that's not contingent upon some other thing, some outside factors that are based on sports. I think is certainly within our purview of at least bringing to the table and presenting to the
It would seem to me that we are neither
request where the money comes from. I think we can request it, but I don't think we're advising them where our money comes from.
I don't think we need to advise or request or demand. I think what we need to do is point out the disparity between what their own strategic plan says the arts and culture does and the way the funding is set up.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I support Marlo's letter. I mean, that's what she lays out right there.
And is quoting them, holding them accountable to the words that they produced.
Mm-hmm.
Really, which is not a request at all, but a little more strong. Well, a lot more strong. Congratulations, Marlo.
But we can take out the ampersands. I'm fine with that.
Well, maybe if you and Josh got together and he took out the ampersands, maybe then we could all sign off on it.
No, the ampersand
footnote for Joshua.
No, I think the ampersand is much more aesthetically pleasing than the letters A, N, and D together. It has form, it has shape, it has presence.
It's got flow.
Yeah.
Okay, can we do this?
Well, you know what has to be done.
Okay, I move, and you can all, I'm talking too much here, guys. You gotta jump in. I'm just tired. I move that we, as a group, as an advisory committee, whatever we want to call ourselves, that we sign on to in support of Marlo's letter and send it to the appropriate powers that be.
Wait a second.
I second.
Just a question. I also heard attaching this to your submitted budget.
Do we want to do that?
Yeah, I think it's symbolic.
I do too.
So Mary, if you would agree to that friendly amendment.
Yes.
All right. All in favor, say aye. I see everyone's hand, unanimous.
Thank you.
Now we're working, folks. All right. We have the strategic committee meeting report. Christina, do you want to walk us through that, Porter, if you could put it up? I'm sorry that I had to miss that. I had not been called to Washington, D.C. in 1 year. Yeah, as you all know, I go there every other week for work. And I had not gone for literally exactly 1 year. And I had to go. So I apologize for missing that meeting. It looks like you guys really, I really like what I saw when I read this stuff.
So Jerry, I think before we get to the Public Art Committee, Outdoor Downtown Sculpture, the Strategic Plan Committee, which I think is what's on the screen, was before the item agenda before ours.
Okay. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, that's what I pulled up. I was not paying attention and pulled up the next item on the agenda.
I wasn't paying attention either, obviously. Let's go. Yeah, sorry. Let's go. It's getting late. Yeah, let's go in order.
On behalf of the Strategic Committee, we had a wonderful meeting and we tried to look at some of the things that spoke to us in the strategic plan or the cultural plan, and to find action items for things that this group can do to put those ideas into place or develop what's already existing. So we just kind of went through, we just gave ourselves an hour, just some bullet points. One great idea that came up was the idea of, could we hold our meetings once we're back in person at different locations outside of City Hall as a way to connect with other groups outside of the municipal facilities of, this building. So would that be something that could be in the realm of our jurisdiction? We weren't sure about rules and, what the laws of order were for those types of public meetings.
As long as it's published with enough time so people know that it's going to be in a different location, yes.
Fantastic. Yeah, we thought that would be really fun. One of the things we did want to see if like our grant programs could attract different groups. Sometimes it feels like the same groups consistently apply. So we thought by us going out and not waiting for people to come to us, that would be a great way to engage those groups. The other idea that came up was creating a Instagram account for our Cultural Arts Commission. We had a really great group between Joshua, Sarah, and Jordan, and the idea of like, can we have some other means of communication for people who may not be on Facebook? Because right now we have that Lawrence Cultural Group on Facebook, but could Instagram also be a social media tool that we could take advantage of to throw a spotlight on some wonderful events? And we thought, okay, if that wasn't possible, like if it was kind of complicated with city, could it be like a off the grid? Like I think Joshua came up with the idea with the LCAC crew username. Could that be something that could be not an official city entity, but something that a group of social media managers from this entity could take on?
Doing it through the city is really challenging and probably not realistic, frankly, just because of capacity on my staff.
And doing it the way you're suggesting gets a little tricky in, you're creating a separate account representing a city board. So that's, we'd have to talk about that. So this is not an easy thing. I understand, and this has come up in various ways. The other thing about something like an Instagram account is who then is providing content and who decides what that content is. And again, if you're doing it as on behalf of a city board, you do have to be very mindful of appropriate content.
Yeah, we thought a couple of the younger members of the committee might be interested in volunteering some time to do that. And if it's a sort of a tag team thing where people are putting different energy, like I always go to Final Friday, once it's in person and like, I snapped a picture, could I do it from an LCAC account or something? But, if we didn't want to be too formal, maybe it could just be Lawrence Cultural Arts or something like that, where it's not necessarily tied to the board, but it could be, board members that are getting together to provide some fun content.
Well, and you actually gave me another thought is instead of representing a board, maybe
represent a program of the board. And then I was thinking, at Culture Chat.
I like that.
That might be a better way to go. And then you're not directly representing a board, but you're representing the program of the board. And then you can decide who would be authorized to submit content for that.
I like that.
See, now we're breaking the rules well. Thank you, Porter. That's exactly what I wanted to hear.
Well, number 3 is putting into action. So, that's wonderful that that's going to happen. So we don't even need to go there. But it just, it has some great, and that actually, now that I'm looking at it, that's the same goal of the cultural plan that we did put in the cultural art grants for last year. So we can just continue that. And then, one thing, this is maybe a longer term thing, but with the minding the gaps part of the cultural plan was looking at ways could the Cultural Commission be a little bit more of liaison for arts and culture events, like in helping navigate through city challenges or, red tape or something that could be involved. Like, I was wondering, is there any way that could we have an email address or some kind of communication so that board members can be sort of liaisons for processes and information.
I'm trying to understand in what capacity.
Well, I think the conversation, it was a really good one. It was about the red tape and paperwork required to utilize like public parks, have parades of their own, you know, a separate organization trying to just navigate some of those some of that bureaucracy, and just being able to be responsive and informative to different organizations on that front for public events, for larger gatherings. Is that right, Marlo?
Yes, that is. You said that much better than I did.
That's tricky in the sense that that's handled by Parks and Recreation. So that's not, you know, that's a separate department, and their board oversees some of their efforts there. So that's the park side. And then permits go through the city clerk's office or planning and development services. So anyway, I think that this might require a little further discussion and understanding to understand. And all that said, I know that all those groups are always looking at ways of making improvements. Part of the challenge with those types of things is, particularly like you were saying, you know, parades and things on streets, you know, that impacts a whole lot of people. And so they have to have enough time to make sure everybody is agreeable before they just authorize that type of thing. So,
well, Porter, I think our conversation was really related to arts, culture, and that sector of the community, and helping, for instance, them understand the Parks and Recs mechanisms and what's required from them. Or if, you know, if it's the city clerk, that we're able to kind of just support and assist in the completion of required documents, or that we can help, you know, be of assistance to them and just navigating the system in whichever department, you know, might hold jurisdiction over that area. And so if we have kind of an advocacy committee or group or liaison who assists in those public events, is really kind of, I think that was my sense of that conversation, was just kind of a liaison of some sort to help just navigate that bureaucracy.
So yeah, we wouldn't be doing any legwork for anybody, but just like maybe pointing some directions. Okay, here's the process to go through, because it can be overwhelming, I think, especially if you're starting a first time event or you're trying to expand things, just to figure out how to navigate that whole entities, you know, do I know whether I'm calling Parks and Rec, or, you know, where do you go?
Yeah, and if I go to the website, which tab am I clicking on to find the right form?
Right.
That's called something that doesn't seem related to what I'm talking about, under what department. And so I think that was the sense, that it would just help to clarify or make, you know, expedite some of those processes by, you know, being supportive and assisted to the community who would like to have such activities.
I think that's a wonderful aspiration. I wouldn't have a clue how to do that. I mean, I wouldn't want to act as a resource and point somebody in the wrong direction.
I think, yeah, with that thought, I'm intrigued, don't get me wrong, but as a staff person who's often helping people do exactly what you're saying, usually what I end up doing is sending them to the right link. For instance, somebody today was asking about a fence, and so I was able to get them quickly to the right place to understand what they need to know about fences. Joshua, your point is well taken. We have literally hundreds of web pages, and unless you really know what you're looking for and where it is, it's difficult. So with that said, I think this probably needs a little more gestation. And I would say if you all can sort of figure out exactly what areas you'd want to help mentor people, and then develop, you know, the step-by-step, here's how to do X, Y, or Z, and then put your name on it, so to speak. Or I'm even thinking that, you know, the Art Commission could potentially have sort of a, here's how to do a parade, here's how to do a Free State Festival. you know, here's all the steps, and put together a fact sheet that then could be available, just showing people. And I often do that just with clip art, just, you know, go to each place and walk through it and then put it on a page in the proper chronology. So somebody can say, oh, okay, I go here, then I click on this and I click on this and fill out this form and I'm good to go. So if you want to do that, you can. I need clarification as to what do you guys see as lacking and what's in your realm as arts and culture representatives. Obviously, you can't serve as staff, so I want to be careful not to inadvertently mislead people. But that said, I'm also hearing equity in the sense that Joshua can reach out to certain people that he knows, or Marlo can reach out to certain artists that may not feel comfortable trying to navigate this on their own. So I think that's great.
Well, and I'm not one who can assist with that, but I'm thinking we often have folks on the commission, like for instance, somebody like Kate Deneen, who really knows in what categories, what websites, or what documents need to be completed to be supportive of the city. I mean, honestly, it's hard to navigate, and not to tax you or your staff over much. You know, if we can be supportive of folks in the artist sector, then we've done a really good job in promoting and advocating and supporting as a resource how to navigate the municipal system to do what they envision. So yeah, I think gestation is right. We just need to figure out who and how, and maybe how we might recruit or how that might be delivered.
Well, and
but those are really good ideas, Porter. I appreciate them for one.
Yeah, no, I think the starting place is, what areas do you see as needing this support? You know, what are you getting approached by, and what are the frustrations people have, and develop a list, and then I can certainly help figure out how to, you know, develop sort of a how-to cheat sheet to help people navigate those things. So somebody comes and says, we want to do a parade, we have no idea how to get a permit. Bam, here's a PDF and here's how to do it.
I love that. Moving on to that next one, we already talked about that. That was just our advocacy efforts. So yeah, but yeah, it was a great group. And, you know, I thank everybody for their energy, because we really wanted to make it an action-oriented discussion rather than just ideas, but just some thoughts on how we might put some things into place.
Great committee work. You guys worked hard.
I'll note that we sincerely miss Jordan's participation. I think she was busy at the time, and you know, I'm sure she would have contributed very much to the conversation. So we look forward to the next meeting, where we'll do more work.
And Jordan shared some really thoughtful thoughts via email, so I tried to integrate them into those notes. And I think especially some of the language choices that we've talked about with the letter that her and Sarah wrote, if there's ways to integrate that into the cultural plan. That's kind of where we let our discussion spring from, was the cultural plan, and thinking of things that needed updating. And that seemed to be one area that I think would be really beneficial.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate seeing things tying back directly to that cultural plan, because it really is a rich, fertile area to have these conversations and to tie it back to the foundation that I think is still very solid.
All right, thanks for that. That's good stuff. Now, Christina, without further.
Great. Well, we also had a very good subcommittee meeting last week as well. We were looking at the proposal from last year for the outdoor downtown sculpture exhibition, and we were kind of going through bit by bit and seeing where we might make recommendations for how we would modify it or make some changes to this year's proposal. And I actually think some of the conversation we've had earlier might inform how we're thinking about this. I'm thinking about some of the dialogue that came up with your storefront art committee meeting might help kind of shape how we go from here. And then also just thinking about budgets and the community arts grants programs too. So I could go through our notes. I don't know, Porter, if it's possible to share with the rest of the committee what I sent around, or I could just go from.
Do you have it?
I do.
If you can share it, that would be great.
Okay, let's see here.
I just don't have it right in front of me, sorry.
It's okay. Okay, you should see something right now. Do you see anything?
Yep.
Okay. So, okay. Let me see here. Great. Okay, so we wanted to propose that we move forward with the program if funding permits. Last year's call went out with the deadline for submissions early February, so we're past that point right now. But I think we could still be okay if we're thinking about an early April deadline for submissions. That would only put us about 2 months past where we were last year. And this would bring installation to occur somewhere around mid-July or mid-August, which we thought would still give the artists about 3 or 4 months for production. And then thinking we could hold the opening event or walkthrough in late August or early September when the weather is a bit cooler, and also maybe coincide with the final Friday event. So that's sort of what we wanted to propose for shaping the new timeline. We thought a lot about artist eligibility, and are there any other restrictions aside from being just 18 years old? Could they be students? Do they need to live within a certain radius from Lawrence? And I remembered, I don't know if this was, I'm just misremembering, but at one point, did we have like a 500-mile radius limit or something to that effect? Or is it really just open to any artist?
I can't I think no, that's right, because we had an artist from Florida.
Yeah.
So we went back and forth on that, and one year we threw it wide open just to see what would happen, and that's when the giant oranges appeared in front of the library. But I think then we realized that financially that was tricky for people, so we brought it back to a regional call. But so maybe it shows that you can do anything you want.
Okay. And then we talked more about the juror and thinking of ways we might be able to maybe look for a sort of a diverse set of jurors. And could we, is there potential to expand the number of jurors and maybe have a small panel? I can't remember who had the good idea, but that maybe we allow for a percentage of the votes to come from the public that might help, bring in that sort of sense of ownership with this program and the community. I don't know if that's in our budget. I know in the past we've just kind of stuck with one special juror for the show. And then also, what is thinking about the role of the commissioners in this entire process? What sort of role do we play? And then thinking about diversity and inclusion and how we might insert some language into the call. How can we reach more, diverse and new audiences? Can we think about how we market this? Just ways of kind of reaching out beyond the sort of typical artist responses that we get. And continuing, so last year, and I think Marlo, you mentioned this too, that we were thinking of these sort of themes, and there was an opportunity for artists to tie in with the John Brown exhibition that was at Watkins. I know that they're actually, they're going to be going ahead with that exhibition. It's going to open in, I think it's early September. So that could still be an opportunity for artists if they wanted to. And then we also suggested in the call that they might think about tying in or connecting with the Common Ground Garden program. And we thought both of those would still be really good opportunities for artists. And then even thinking there might be something that we're not thinking of for this year that would be new that artists could tie in with. So that's sort of where we were. We're thinking timeline, thinking about artist eligibility, issues of diversity and inclusion, kind of thinking how we approach the juror, and then any other further opportunities for artists. So I'm just putting that out there for feedback, suggestions.
Do you think, Porter, I mean, the 2-month delay, is that in your experiences? I mean, these are usually, you know, more significant pieces.
Is there any downside to us, you know, going ahead knowing that it's delayed by that much?
Again, I think as long as we can pay people in this calendar year, that's fine. You know, we have several artworks that have been up now for a few years. We're not paying for those anymore. We paid one initial, you know, commission, but some, you know, artists prefer to leave them up where they can. So I think that's doable. The biggest thing, as Christina pointed out, is you definitely have to give them enough time to produce especially if they're creating something brand new, they need time to develop it and actually fabricate it.
Right. But if they know ahead of time that they've got whatever it is, 3 to 4 months, they can scope based on.
Sure.
On that.
Yeah, I mean, last year the deadline was early February for a early June installation. So that's about a 4-month spread. So if we're asking for an early April installing the work around even a mid-August, that would be, again, that 4-month period.
Having been out there a few times when we did the thing when it was super hot, it's not such a bad idea for it to happen a little bit later.
I'd be okay with that. I've been out in those hot tours and
lost about 20 pounds, which I could actually need to do from COVID. So maybe that's a good thing. On number 3, I love the idea of a panel. I think engaging more people. I think the juror idea was a good one in its day, of trying to get exposure to like curators and other arts professionals in other places. But I think nowadays having people engaged in the process is always such a revealing, you know, opportunity. I'm not opposed to the idea of putting it out to a broader community vote. It's just the question there is how.
Yeah.
And how much energy might that take from somebody to coordinate something like that? I guess it could be done via social media, but that scares me half to death.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking to that, you know, because this was something that I brought up in our meeting. Obviously, I'm very familiar with the notion of social media polls leading to basically, you know, jokey results and stuff like that. So one of the things that we talked about was the idea that, you know, we could maybe have 3 professional jurors who are representative of the community, and then have the community sort of vote, and all of the community's vote would maybe be equivalent to like 1 juror. That way there would be an input from the community, but it wouldn't really have the potential to maybe take things completely off the rails if people did decide they wanted to make a practical joke out of it or whatever, which is entertaining, but maybe not our end goal. So that was one of the ideas, that we wanted the community to be able to have a voice, but also to have it be, you know, moderated by the presence of other jurors as well.
I would say, by the way, I like the idea of having a panel, a small panel, obviously not too big, but I would say in defense of the sole juror, there was one year, and I know this depends on who the juror is, but there was one year where the juror, we had go from piece to piece and give a talk about their experience with the artist and the work and all that stuff. And I was riveted by that whole thing. I mean, it was really, really well done. I think but that's not to say that we couldn't, you know, have some piece of that or whatever with a panel. And I also understand that every juror wouldn't have that, you know, that same thing. But that one year I remember that was absolutely outstanding. It was very impactful. So just tossing that out there. Is there a number that's too big, Porter, that in your experience? I mean, where's well, I guess you have to find people to do it.
Yeah, I would say, you know, 2 or 3 people as a panel is a good number because they can work efficiently.
You get 3 different perspectives. I've sat on a lot of 3-member juries and panels, and it's a good way to go. Another option too, I like what Daniel was saying, is at the end of this, doing a live tour really is fun, although when it's 103 degrees out and you're walking 6 miles. But you could also pull together a panel and have the 3 jurors with photographs talking about their selections and that type of thing as well. Daniel,
like air conditioning?
In air conditioning, yeah, like in a library, if we can all gather in human form again. Daniel, I'm not positive I understood, and forgive me if I didn't, but one thing I have seen is, like you said, maybe if we get, say, 20 submissions, and the jurors narrow that down to, say, 3 to 5, and then you allow public voting, that's another way to do that. And that way you've curated to a certain level, and then the voting is just picking one. There's always a risk in that because you do get, snarky comments and things, but I guess there's ways to mitigate that or ameliorate it to some degree. And it is fun to engage the community, sorry.
No, I think there's a number of ways to do it. I think that just the basic idea of having some amount of community input, and along with some amount of expert panel input, the balance and how exactly it's executed, I don't have a specific recommendation, but I think it's an interesting thing to explore, and I think it'll make people in general more interested in the initiative and more engaged with the sculptures and everything as they go up.
It's making the process more transparent too, which I think would be beneficial for this project.
So thinking about your workload and how much we're asking you to do, Porter, we have the grants thing, and we have this sort of trying to get out. What are you thinking?
I'm looking at the timeline. I guess I'm going to have trouble with that early April deadline. Mm-hmm. Realistically, in part because I'm actually heading out of town too. That said, I don't know if this committee would want to take on redrafting the existing guidelines and just, basically, I don't know if it's a full redraft or it's just interweaving some of these points. That would be one option. Mm-hmm. And then get the call out as quickly as possible.
I don't think it would be a full overhaul. I think it could be fairly easily updated and revised. The only sort of blank area from last year's call was under juror, it just said TBD. So we might want to consider if we want to have a little bit more explanation about that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think it'd be fairly easy to revise and update.
Yeah, I think based on the conversation we had, we were thinking that if everybody present here is okay with these modifications, we could turn around and have the call ready to go out pretty quickly. And the one thing which is kind of up in the air is the juror process, which wouldn't have to be as developed. We could leave that a little bit vague and work that out as we identify potential jurors and figure out if we do want to have the community component.
And I don't know, you don't have to necessarily
a three juror panel
without us knowing who they are. That's fine, isn't it?
Yeah, I think
that's okay. I don't think you have to spell out the details on that. I mean, you can as much as you want to. I do believe artists have to be 18 years or older. Mm-hmm. And I believe that's for liability purposes. As far as how far from here, what I typically do is put a mile radius. So you could either say Lawrence, Douglas County, within 50 miles, I think hits Kansas City, Topeka. You know, that's up to you all as to how wide a net you want to cast. I do know, like our artist in Florida, there are several artists that do this enough that they actually are willing to, deliver their artworks from various places as they're going from place to place. So that guy in Florida, on his way through Lawrence, dropped off one artwork, and then I think he was heading up to Omaha or something. So I'm not encouraging it. I'm just saying that, you really can't go wrong there.
Would it be helpful if I revised the call from last year based on what we've talked about and send that to you, Porter, to look over? And
Yep.
What would be the best way to proceed?
That would be the most efficient way to proceed, and craft it that way, and then get it back to me. Like I said, I'm heading out of town, so I won't be able to get to this right away.
Sure.
So we'll just have to adapt the schedule accordingly. But when I go back to my office tonight, I'll send you the Word doc, so you don't have to reinvent any wheels, and
okay,
just adapt that. That's great.
I mean, our next meeting is April 14th, so maybe if we wanted to use a little bit of that time to just finalize all of this and approve it at that meeting, and then it'd be ready to go. And that's not too far off this kind of idea of early April.
Oh, I thought you meant submissions be back by early April.
Yes, you're correct.
So we'd have to adjust
Early,
that.
yeah.
You have to give people, you typically have to give people at least a month, if not 5 or 6 weeks, to respond to a call.
Yeah. So maybe we need to extend that because it's already March.
Right.
Something. Okay.
But why don't you, I'll send it to you if you can go ahead and tweak it, if this is agreeable with the board, and then get it back to me, and then I can take a look at it and tweak it a little further, and then bring it to your committee, and then we would, at that point, determine the timeline and move forward.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Do it. Any other comments on outdoor? ODSE?
I would entertain a motion to adjourn since it's 10 p.m.
If I may interject very, very quickly.
Sure.
So everybody knows, if you have
gone by in the Senior Resource Center and Fire Station 1 recently, Jacob Bermud's artwork and sculpture is in place. He has this nice pedestal and the artwork is in place. He wants to give it, he was trying to get it in between cold weather at that time. So he's not titled it yet. He wants to let it sort of season in place, and then he wants to come up with the title, and then I'm working on a plaque, and we're also working with the Senior Resource Center to create a smaller plaque that describes the relationship with the building and the two agencies there, and something that kind of pays homage to the history of that whole place. So it's all in process, but the artwork is in place. It looks fabulous, and we got a lot of really positive comments when he was installing that.
How about that motion to adjourn?
I make that motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Say bye. All in favor, say bye.
Bye. Thank you all.
Folks, thank you.